Thank you. Respected Shri Arpit Chadda ji, Vice Chairman ITS Group of Education, Professor Pandey, the faculty, esteemed guests, eminent panelists, participants from the world, and dear students. When I say, firstly, thanks to the ITS Group for giving me an opportunity to interact with the education providers, whom I call as nation builders, the students, whom I call as custodians of the future nation, and all other guests, whom I call as fellow passengers in this challenging world which we all face. It's an opportunity for me to be learning from the expert minds and the brilliant minds which are there on your panel earlier and now. As we speak, the world is going through a plethora of challenges. We all are aware of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant economic and health emergencies which are accrued. But you always have a notorious mind who want to make best use of the medium which you work, and they don't spare even COVID-19. The fact that the cyber attacks were done to steal the research of the COVID vaccine indicates as to what this IT infrastructure is being threatened with by the notorious minds in the cyber domain. We also know that various examples, like in Mumbai, the entire power grid was taken away and was shut down for some time, allegedly by, again, the cyber attacks. So these are the kinds of challenges to the services and challenges to the adversaries. And when I say adversaries, it is adversaries are countries, adversaries are human beings, adversaries are groups, adversaries are institutions, adversaries are business, adversaries are social groups. The adversaries are also your essential services, which you can't live without. So therefore, there is a dimension of this adversary. So there is a cyber offense, and therefore there is a cyber defense, and therefore there is cyber warfare. Now, speakers before me, they have spoken about the virtual space, the challenges in that space, and the opportunities which this space gives you. But I'll touch upon few specific issues. One is that I'll link this with the cyber warfare. How dangerous is this dimension of warfare? How difficult it is to control globally, and then what is being done at the global level and the United Nations level. And then what more needs to be done. So coming on to the first part of it, that is the dangerousness of this. You see, when I said adversary and I defined adversary, it almost includes everyone, whether it is a state or it is non-state actor or it is in the individual capacity. So therefore the threat is present. The threat is to everybody. And when I talk of the dangerousness, I would say that the dimension of the warfare keeps changing as the innovative mind keeps inventing the new methodologies to change the adversary. We used to have conventional war, now it has become cost prohibitive. You can't have nuclear war because it is a self-assured mutual destruction. We also have space warfare, but it is far too costly. We also used to have terrorism, but then it requires a non-state actor to execute it. And therefore, all these examples are the examples of a kinetic war. Kinetic war means something is physically being applied or moved. So therefore, the innovative minds have now gone into the non-kinetic warfare, which is the cyber domain. They all realize that now you are used to a medium which you can't live without. And if you can't live without, it is an essentiality. And since it is an essentiality, it's a common space. And if it is a common space, then I might as well utilize it. And once I utilize it, certainly I can utilize it for warfare. Now, the important thing is that firstly, this kind of warfare does not require a declaration of war. For conventional war, there is some build-up to take place, and then there is a declaration of war. But in cyber warfare, it is still existing. Today, we are on warfare. Cyber warfare is on as of today. So, no declaration of war. There are no boundaries. It is omnipresent. So, that is another challenge. And then the biggest challenge is that this warfare can be combined with any kind of warfare. It can be combined with conventional warfare. It can be combined with terrorism, and you call it cyber terrorism. It can be combined with, let's say, normal, even with the nuclear warfare. If at all a threat is to be posed, somebody's nuclear arsenal can be blocked. Now, that is also cyber warfare. So, it could be combined with everybody. And then the problem is of the deniability. It has the advantage of deniability. The other important thing is, since I mentioned the number of adversaries, so therefore there is no dearth of targets. For other kind of warfare, there are specified targets. For conventional warfare, you need military targets. For terrorism, you want innocent people or people who can be targeted and who are not that well secured. But for this warfare, there is plethora of targets. So it is a warfare in which I think target is not a restriction. So then becomes the challenges as to how do you control it. Now, as I said, that it's not only the non-state actors which are doing it. The state has got involved. The states have improved their capabilities. We are aware of various countries who are trying to target our country and the other countries, and they have a full-fledged organization to deal with it. And all countries, by and large, are trying to raise organizations. And some of my co-panelists will be touching upon those organizations as far as our country is concerned and as far as other countries are concerned. So, therefore, there is an organization that place, and organization is state as well as non-state actor. Secondly, there is a possibility of a false flag operation, meaning thereby that state X want to launch cyber warfare against state Y. He puts his non-state actor in state Z, and then he executes it from there. Now what happens is, the state which is sponsoring it, it has got full deniability, and the non-state actor which is somewhere else, you can find that the target country will perhaps have strained relations with the country from where it was detected, number one. Number two, the other state is having a laugh that, okay, he has made spoiled the relation between two countries which were actually not doing cyber warfare with each other. Now, this is another dimension which has come up. The fact that ISIS could gather so many recruits all over the world is also an element of cyber terrorism, because they chose this medium to firstly get into your personal space and then to get into your ideologies. And when they found that your ideologies are somewhat in sync with what they were looking for, then they targeted on you and gave you some kind of lurement to get into this these such organizations. So this is the dangerousness as well as the difficulty. The second part of the difficulty is that once it crosses the boundary, your legal laws are not applicable in the other countries. Whatever are our cyber laws, when the attack is being launched from, again, Y country, then our laws are not available and not applicable in Y country. So he derives an immunity out of it. Firstly, he's got the anonymity, but if you break the anonymity and if you are able to break as to from where it has been done, then comes the immunity part of it. Because even if you have identified who the guy is, then the guy is, you have to approach that country. And whether there are adequate laws to that effect, that I'll cover a little later. Then comes, there is a side effect of it, which I think one of the panelists did talk about, and that is cyber panic. The fact is that your system can be targeted, you are under panic. Number two, your fellow system has been targeted, you get panicked. And second is that whenever effect is targeted and this information flows all over, then again a panic starts. Similarly, people use this panic for profiteering also. Like somebody wants to sell his cyber product, or shall we say cyber protection product. He will first attack you, and then when your computer creates a problem, then you get panicked. And then he will say, no, I think your computer is facing so many problems, and therefore here is a solution to it. And then he gives you the solution. And in that solution, not only he solves the previous problem, but he creates some new problems. And by creating those new problems, obviously, he has been able to make some money out of it. So that is another dimension of the problem to deal with it. Then there is a factor of the transparency. Now, what happens is, you want to deal with cyber warfare. You want, for dealing with that, obviously you will have to get into network, and that will amount to getting into somebody's privacy. Now, globally, the ICT privacy is very dear to everybody. Everybody wants to be safe, but nobody wants that you encroach into my privacy. Now, all cyber terrorists, they are using your WhatsApp group. But the moment the government wants them to get into your WhatsApp group, then there is hue and cry everywhere. For example, I'll give you the, we are all aware of the abrogation of Article 370. The nets had to be switched off and the WhatsApp arrangements have to be switched off in Kashmir. We knew that earlier when we had some similar kind of situation, there were far too many killings when some of the key terrorists were killed. So when we did this, and this time when the internet was switched off, all over the world there was hue and cry. The reason is, and I remember categorically, I was in Washington last year, or year before last, somewhere in the later period of last, once we had switched off the internet. I was asked by a group of people in United Nations, why have you switched off the internet? And they all were saying, you can't live without internet, because their life is so used to it that they are absolutely restless. And they must be thinking that all the Kashmiris are also restless accordingly. Then I had to tell them very simple thing and explain it in a very simple military-like language. I said, yes, there is a right to privacy, but there is also a right to life. If I open up the privacy part of it, and if thousands of people are killed in Kashmir, you are not responsible. My government is responsible. So I have to choose between the two. I don't mind some of the guys suffering because of not having internet, but if I, in that bargain, if I can save thousands of lives, I will prefer that, and that is a sovereign decision of my country. So let's be quite clear as to I have to choose between these two rights, and these two are both are basic rights. And I think right to life is certainly more important than right to privacy to that extent. So, but this right, I should say, a fight for right to privacy, it still continues. Even today, the government is approaching the High Court to say that no, we should be getting access to WhatsApp, because if we don't get access, then how do we catch? So, and this thing is already on, and the court will have its own view. Now, these are some of the challenges as to what makes it difficult to fight the cyber warfare. Now, what has been done so far? There has been some sessions in United Nations General Assembly. Now, there were two resolutions passed. One was Resolution 7327. It deals with the field of information and telecommunication in the context of national security. Now, although the resolution has been passed, but when we start using our sovereign rights to prevent cybercrime, then people are still criticizing us. So that's one part of it. And it's not us, it is all other countries as well. The second resolution was 73/266. Now that is advancing responsible state behavior in cyberspace in context of international security. Now what does it mean? These two are controversial. Different countries in the world have different definition of freedom and different definition of privacy. So therefore, there is a governmental group of experts, which is called as GGE. They have been made responsible to come up with a study, and that study is supposed to be completed by 2020 and 2021, and it is going to come up. And once it comes up, we will have something as to what can there be a common ground to make some United Nations conventions on the cyber security. So this is where the United Nations stands as of today. The other problem is, in absence of this, most of the countries, whether it is India or in the United States or it is anybody else, they all are making their own capacity building to fight a cyber warfare. And this cyber warfare is also for your data sovereignty. It is also for your data production. It is also for your cyber defense, as we call it. So your cyber defense will have to move into civil as well as military domain. I'm sure other panelists will also speak about it. So I won't dwell too much on that. Now, to choke the cyber attacks, certainly we need to get into the cyberspace of the state actors as well as the non-state actors. And when I say state actors, then there is a need for collaboration of various countries. And unless you have the collaboration, it's almost a no-go situation, and we all are fighting isolated battles. All countries are fighting isolated battles. There is also a need for capacity building. Today, the Defense Secretary is here in the country, and even in Quad, it was mentioned that we are looking towards technology cooperation with the United States in improving the capacity for the cyber defense. So that is one of the items which is certainly on the agenda. And another dangerous factor of this cyber warfare is that it is an asymmetrical warfare in a manner that the person who is not that empowered can attack the most empowered person and the most technologically savvy person in a manner that the United States, which is so advanced in the cyber domain, even they are facing perhaps the largest amount of cyber attacks. So this is another dimension to it. So now, therefore, what needs to be done? Certainly, we need a legal framework, not only within the country, we also need it outside the country. We have certain gaps in the legal framework within the country. I'm sure somebody is going to speak on it. And even outside, there is an article called as Article 51 of UN Charter, which gives you right for self-defense. Now, what is being thought of is that this right for self-defense must also get extended to right for for the data security as well, for data sovereignty, as well as right to protect yourself from cyber attack. Now, that should also become a basic right. Similarly, there need to be some binding agreement between at least the governments to start with. Although non-state actors will never bind themselves by agreement, they have never bound themselves by now. And so is the problem with in tackling with it. Then is the problem of the transparency. And I said there is an accidental triggering of cyber warfare by a non-state actor. Somebody sitting in some country starts off against a country and gives the identity of another country, and two countries start fighting without actually having a cause for it. So this is called as accidental triggering of a cyber conflict. So therefore, there is a need for bilateral mechanism and there is a need for multilateral mechanism. The fact that I referred to Quad was that we are now looking at the multilateral mechanism to do such a thing. Then another thing which is coming up, in fact, that is something which I have written on various occasions in various forums, is that we need to have the global condemnation of the cyber attack once identified. And this global condemnation should be something on the lines of, we have something called as FATF, for terror funding, there is a financial action task force. Why shouldn't there be a task force to punish the cyber offender. And if it is a state, certainly why not to boycott that state? So this is something which is, again, I've thrown a point. Let's see how it goes. I have echoed in certain United Nations forums also. Let's see where it goes from here. Then when it comes to own, I think a number of speakers have already spoken. We certainly need to improve our cyber hygiene, and nations must have to share their technological expertise with the not so technologically empowered country to build up their capacity so that they can also do it. So at the end, I would say that certainly there is a need for UN resolution. There is need for treaties. There's a need to promote the peaceful ICT environment in the lines of arms control treaties and punitive action against the cyber offenders and the cyber terrorists, and the states who sponsor such kind of terrorism. So there is a cyber warfare on. Can there be a cyber peace is a question which we all have to answer. And it is, as of now, it is a distant dream. I rest my case here. Over to the ITS.